Brandon, I'll just start by saying I think this is one of the better start to finish Dynamites in a while. Just the formatting, everything was sensible, well paced, good mix of action. It closed with hype for next week's big themed show, Beach Break. Just kind of big picture. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree. I think it still had some of the proclivities or nagging little issues that I kind of see in my regular viewing of AEW, but a lot of that is I think related to my disinterest in the main event scene as a whole, and my continued um I continue to be really down on the John Moxley story and the John Moxley angle as a whole. And I think that they did a good job with what they're with the content that they're presenting and their booking. I just wish that we were headed in a different direction, main event wise. So that kind of takes things down overall for me. But generally speaking, I mean, prior to that, I thought things were largely very good. It's funny that the last time I was on the AEW Dynamite post show with you, we were talking about an Adam Copeland versus Claudio main event, and now we have uh, John Moxley's new opponent, Samoa Joe, facing once again Claudio.
And yeah, I mean, formulaically, this show made sense. If you structurally
Yes.
looked at what we're going to do, we're going to open with this promo with two top stars, which I thought was very good, Ospreay and Hangman. I thought that was a signature segment for both of them. And then some good action and matches that are relevant, but not at pay-per-view level. And then they did a good job, not a great job, but a good job hyping Samoa Joe and Claudio, which was basically there to be a good, hard-hitting AEW branded event that then set up the angle and hype for next week's show. As far as Moxley goes, I think right now with him, there's more of an absence of irritants for me with his current character because we're not getting the big speeches that I don't think
Sure.
landed with the audience. He's not talking about some mission and some vague terms that nobody really understands, and it sounds like he's saying things you would root for, but he's doing it in a way where we're supposed to boom. I didn't like any of that. I didn't think it worked that too often. Even in the Blackpool Combat Club, they were heels going for cheers or baby faces with an edge that were counted as baby faces. And I just think the role of a heel ultimately is to put over a baby face and make them look strong. There's a lot of other factors in being a good heel, but you have to have that as a primary job. I think I can't remember who said it, Mickey James or Undertaker, or somebody said that on the first episode of LFG. Like the job of heel is to put over a baby face and make them look good. It was a match critique. And it doesn't mean you can't get yourself over too. But what we had here is Moxley. He's acting lately in a way that is not encouraging fan cheers. He's not being as cool as he used to be. He stood there and let his friend get beat up. They had, they didn't have numbers, but how's that ever stopped Moxley before with Hobbs in the ring with a chair? That seemed to be enough for John to just stand and watch and kind of hang his head going, well, what can I do about it? I've got a world title match next week. It's logical, but it's, a little more heelish than Moxley had been in a while. Yes, I'm ready to move on from Moxley being in the world title scene, especially since, we have, was it Hangman who called Ospreay the guy known as the best wrestler in the world? It's like, Todd Martin made this point months ago, probably a year ago, just going, maybe I don't have no sense of time. Maybe it was 3 years ago at this point, but no wrestler should ever refer to someone as the best wrestler in the world on a TV show if that wrestler isn't the world champion or they're not challenging for the world title and advocating for that person being better. And we're not quite in that specific spot here now. So if you're going to just make it seem like Moxley happens to be world champion, but we're going to say other people are better wrestlers, well, let's just get around to putting the belt on the better wrestler. So Moxley doesn't feel, I think he's playing a heel role better. And therefore, it's not undercutting Samoa Joe, who's a sort of Teflon. He's not going to, easily be booed or undercut, but others could be. But it does seem like the company's ready to move on. Let's get through the Owen and all that and then move on. So, Brandon.
I think that for me, a lot of it has to do with the fact that so much of really all of Moxley's programs as world champion have been angles that felt like foregone conclusions, with the sole exception of Swerve Strickland. I mean, everyone else that he has faced so far, it seemed like more or less a guaranteed retention for Moxley. And sometimes that's fine, but when the crowd isn't buying into what they're being sold overall, and it just keeps getting punted down the road seemingly farther and farther, I think patience starts to wear thin. There's also a sense to me, and I agree that Moxley has been better as of late. I will take this version of John Moxley and the Death Riders any day over what we were seeing in the fall, for example. Right. But I also think there's a certain sense that they are existing on an island, and they are so different from the rest of what AEW is presenting. And sometimes that can be a good thing. Like, I look at the Hurt Syndicate, for example, and we'll talk about them, I'm sure, on this show. Sure. Yeah. I think that they're different in a very, very good way. They bring something markedly different to the product that is it's just a different spice. It's a different flavor, and I think it works well. But I think that what Moxley is bringing to the table, especially in ring right now, is a net negative. And I like Moxley as a wrestler, but I just don't think that anything that they have presented in pay-per-view main events has left anything but a sour taste in my mouth for months now.
Yeah, fair enough. Larry from DAVDB. I don't know what that is. I should maybe. Do you know, Brandon?
From the I don't.
Yeah, so to explain that in the chat, Larry, for us. But he says, I agree with Brandon. The AEW has never appeared so irrelevant. Andrew WR asks, what is the constitution of the Death Riders? What is it now? Their mission, I didn't like it, but they had a mission before. I mean, I would say the constitution is John Moxley is the badass champion who will retain the title ruthlessly without any parameters or mercy, and we're his henchmen trying to enforce it. I mean, I think that's it. And I don't know that that's not enough. I think that might be enough. What do you think?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess that's it. I don't love that Moxley continues to carry around the title in the briefcase, or at least we presume he does. It seems like a leftover, like the one last piece of the leftover abandoned angle, and I don't think they've done a good job of explaining that in new terms, or at least updated terms. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess what you alluded to is the best that we can really surmise at this point.
Yeah. All right, let's pause early here and introduce ourselves, and then keep rolling through more on this topic, more from the chat, and then some of the other things that we've touched on here. There's a lot to get into on the show tonight. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, the editor, publisher, and founder of the PWTorch weekly newsletter. I thought I had one on my desk here. Today's issue that just went to press, but I think I put it somewhere else. So I won't be holding it up for everybody. But been publishing that for decades, and also PWTorch.com, our website, with cool articles that'll make you think and understand the business better. We have a 4-part series online right now with Chris Lansdale writing about New Japan. It's a 4-part primer. Each part is kind of a different aspect of New Japan, history, factions, championships. If you're looking to get into New Japan, he explains why now's kind of a good time if you haven't really before, because it feels like the start of a new era in a way. You won't be getting in right in the middle in certain respects, but he catches you up. So anyways, great content over there. Breaking news, live TV, and pay-per-view coverage. I'll have my Backlash report up on Saturday. Brandon, I got my schedule together this week. I'm not going to plug you doing something you're not doing. So you will have this. You've got other things going on Saturday, so I'll be reporting on Backlash without the accompaniment of your report also. But we do hope to and plan to have a Wrestling Night in America post show afterwards. Host and co-host DBA. TDB. What's TBA? To
Doing
be
business
announced? DBA. Yeah. I combined TBA and something else. Anyway, So anyway, that's what we do. I also host the Wade Keller post shows. You're watching that right now on YouTube, or listening to it right now on the Wade Keller post show podcast feed. Wherever you are, you're welcome to join us in the other format on YouTube. You can see us, be part of the chat. You can watch us and listen live through that format. Many of you, like me, are more often listening to shows like this in a podcast audio format. I do it on my bike rides, my car rides, when cleaning around the house, sometimes when just doing work at the desk. And you're welcome to subscribe for free to our podcast feed. Search Wade Keller, subscribe to the red logo show, which is our post shows after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown, other bonus content, including some cool flashbacks. And the blue logo show pops up when you search Wade Keller. That's our includes our weekly flagship, pay-per-view previews, interviews, and a lot of classic content from 5, 10, and 15 years ago. We've been doing this podcasting a long time. So subscribe to both. And that includes yesterday's flagship with Rich Fan. We talked AEW. We also talked a lot of WWE and everything that's going on in leading up to the big events this May and beyond. Also search PWTorch to subscribe to the PWTorch Daily Cast, a different show each day of the week with a different theme and different hosts. And when you search PWTorch, you'll also see a charcoal gray logo pop up that says PWTorch VIP. Subscribe to that for free. It includes just free samples now and then of our VIP content. If you use the native Apple Podcast app and you have an Apple account, if you are an iPhone, you can actually upgrade to a VIP podcast feed. Unlock all the VIP shows right within the app. It's a cool setup. Other ways you can go VIP and get our VIP shows is through Patreon or Spotify. Just search PWTorch VIP. You get a 7-day free trial through that method. And if you want to get a full VIP membership, access to 35 plus years of archives, an ad-free website, a customizable RSS feed for all of our VIP shows. You can have separate feeds on your podcast app for each individual show or clusters of shows like current events and historical and flashback shows. Pretty slick. Go to pwtorch.com/govip for full details on the full VIP membership and also links to the other options if those interest you. That's pwtorch.com/govip. You can read back issues of the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, the pre-podcast, pre-internet era, dating back to the late 1980s and march through some of your favorite eras. We don't go quite back to 1983 and Tennessee, as Don Callis threw a reference in when talking about the Outrunners tonight, but we do go back to late 1987. So there's some cool content to dive into there and learn about wrestling history and just see what I've been saying about wrestling for a very long time and read my long-form interviews with some of pro wrestling's biggest stars on camera and biggest people behind the scenes, writers and promoters. I could go on and on. It's a cool treasure of wrestling coverage when you go VIP, so check it out. But we are here to engage in conversation on tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite. This was clearly a setup show to hype and build tomorrow's beach break themed show in Chicago tomorrow night. But nevertheless, I thought it was a good, productive show. It didn't feel like the people who were there were just there to see an infomercial. So we'll dive more into that. My co-host today is Brandon LeClair. As noted, he normally helps cover pay-per-views and PLEs on weekends with written reports at our website, pwtorch.com, and also hosting now Wrestling Night in America. And he also occasionally co-hosts with me still on the post shows, and it's great to have him here this week, especially since he won't be with us on Saturday after Backlash. Brandon, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Cool. Anything going on you want to share? Any fun, any good movie recommendations?
Yeah, Sinners.
Okay.
In theaters now.
Yeah.
Definitely worth a trip to the theater for sure.
Cool. What's the genre? Or people can look it up, but why do you recommend it? Why is it? How good is it? It's good. It's like, whoa.
It's Ryan Coogler. So for people who aren't familiar, guy who directed Black Panther, for example, a film called Fruitvale Station. He often works with Michael B. Jordan, great actor. It's a very interesting and well-developed take on the vampire genre. I wouldn't call it a horror movie, so if you're not into horror, I think it's still fine as long as you can handle a little gore. Just a really cool original script, original film.
Cool. I know you're a movie guy. We have so many people on the Torch group of contributors, our team, that are big movie buffs. I feel one of these days we're going to have like a weekly spin-off show. There's just, there's like so many people who are so into movies also. Anyway, yeah, we encourage you to join us if you're watching us live on YouTube. And if you want to watch us on YouTube or subscribe, search PWTorch on YouTube or youtube.com/PWTorch. And you can find our post shows there and other content. Frank Pettiani's Wrestling Then and Now shows are on there. Also have shorts that we feature. So check that out and subscribe, please, to our channel. We want to continue to march forward towards different landmarks for subscriber levels and listenership levels. And the way you can help us do that is, first of all, subscribe if you haven't yet. That's easy to do. It's free. Just click the subscribe button or smash it, as people have said for some reason. And also like this episode and make a comment in the comments area. All that engagement helps. You can also set an alarm so that you get alerted when we're about to go live in case you forget and want to join us. If you're listening to us on the podcast side of things, please leave some kind words and a 5-star rating if that is offered to you in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. You can also join us live in the chat when you are watching us live on YouTube. The chat is open. We'll continue to feature comments. I'll always read them out loud for our podcast audience, but we'll put them on the screen for our viewers also. And you can email us, wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com, wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to contribute thoughts or questions that might not fit into the chat, or maybe you're not going to watch us live, but you're watching the actual wrestling shows and you have comments or questions or feedback or rants and you want them to be part of the show, that's how you can be part of our post show without actually watching live. And then finally, if you're a VIP member, Patreon supporter, we invite you to join us in the waiting room. You can be in the waiting room and we'll bring you onto the show to comment either on camera or off camera. You can turn your camera off if you don't want to be on camera, no big deal. To do that, you can find the link in my TV report at PWTorchVIP.com covering tonight's Dynamite. The link changes every time, so you have to get the current link in my TV report, or we post it on Patreon for our Patreon supporters. If you are an Apple Podcast subscriber, you can email me and request that code at wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. We don't want to exclude you guys either. I was going to say one other thing plug-wise, and now my mind is blank. I don't remember what it was. Hopefully it's not essential. So if I think of it, I'll just blurt it out while you're talking, Brandon, so I don't forget again.
Perfect.
But yeah, let's move on and talk more about. Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. Usually I just rattle through that stuff, and I'm like happy I got everything done, even if it takes longer than I wanted. But I don't remember. All right. So regarding the main event tonight, how do you think Joe looked? I mean, he's I'd say my own, I don't want to say my only critique, but I think the main thing that comes to mind in terms of my critique of next week's match is they didn't give us a story to believe in regarding Joe having his eye on the world title and getting people excited about the prospects of him winning. And I just think if you're going to promote the world title match next week by saying it's a world title match, it's in a cage, it's Samoa Joe, okay, that's all great. Make us believe Joe can win and give us like a context for why that would be changing the course of AEW. And I don't think on commentary they played out like, if Joe wins, imagine what can happen with the Owen, and at Double or Nothing, what will that mean? Like, it didn't come across to me like we didn't have that Joe promo that's just like, this is my time, I want to win the title again, and if you do that, yes, you're setting people up to be disappointed, because I'm almost positive John Moxley's going to beat Joe next week. But I'd still say make us believe it can happen every time. And I mean, part of pro wrestling is rooting for a babyface to beat a heel champion and it not happening, but you got to promote it. So I'd say that's one area where I just don't think they made me think at all in a meta sense Joe's going to win. And I don't think they told the story in more kind of regular average viewer sense that, yeah, they should be hyped up about Joe. Do you agree with me on that? Am I leaving some things out from the show tonight, Brandon?
No. I think that you're right. And that's part of the issue that I have had with most of John Moxley's angles, is that, like I kind of mentioned, there's a lot of opponents that just don't feel like legitimate threats to Moxley's title reign. And I mean that too in a meta sense. Like it just doesn't feel like they have a chance of taking the world championship. And so to that end, you kind of have this situation where it feels like we're just punting from one feud to the next, getting down the road until we get to what everyone assumes is the Will Ospreay match at All In. So I think that there's definitely a semblance of that here. I think, given that Joe hasn't necessarily been prominently featured, especially as a singles act, up until the last few weeks here as they moved him in position to challenge Moxley, I don't know that there's been a ton of opportunity to do that, but that's something that they should have had the foresight to do. I mean, they at least introduced the concept of Joe getting involved with Moxley by having him watching from, a skybox or whatever it was
Yeah.
during the last pay-per-view main event. But it just feels like this is another angle where the challenger is more concerned with the depravity of the Death Riders as a group and ending their dominance than they are taking the world title. I mean, that even Swerve was the same way. Swerve was distracted by who Moxley has become versus becoming world champion again. And I think it's been the same situation largely with Samoa Joe.
From a match quality standpoint, did Joe seem like he can still go? I mean, it's LeBron James, Steph Curry. There's like these veterans in the NBA who can still go, but the story is for how much longer. Steph Curry pulling a hamstring last night. LeBron, maybe not having the legs under him in the Lakers series. I'm familiar with this because of my Timberwolves. But they are two top stories. They're two just legends of the NBA. Joe's a legend in pro wrestling. I mean, he's done so much, especially at an AEW. I mean, he was in WWE, but for AEW fans, his history with ROH and Impact Wrestling, there's sort of a continuum there with obviously AEW owning the ROH brand and a lot of wrestlers. When we do our flashbacks of Impact Wrestling from 10 and 20 years ago, it's remarkable how many wrestlers from TNA Impact are on Dynamite or have been and still are. So he's kind of part of that continuum. He's a legend, but he's winning a world title at a time when fans know he's getting near the end. This could be his last stand going for a world title. He obviously got Claudio to tap out quickly, and it was clean. The snap power slam still looks great. He looks badass, but was there anything about it that made it seem like, it's almost like it's not quite Rhino, coming out to lose quickly to Nick Wayne, but it's a foregone conclusion. This is just like, Joe's a legacy star getting a shot, but we shouldn't take it seriously. Look at him. He's not where he once was. Or did it come across like, no, this is the guy who I could see defending the title?
No, I think Joe still has it. I mean, I don't see he's obviously a step slower, right? Like somebody like AJ Styles is a step or two slower, but is still very, very good. And I think Joe falls more so in that category than some of the other guys that we've discussed. I think that during Joe's first title or his only title run, I think that he was still putting on quality main events with a variety of opponents, and I don't think that all that much has changed. I mean, what we're talking a year later at this point, and he hasn't added a bunch of extra tread on the tires, or extra wear on the tires. I think that largely he's the same guy that he was last year, and I think that is very much good enough for a stint in the main event. Do I think that is necessarily going to lead to a great match with Moxley, given the style that John has been working these last several months? No. I mean, I hope that it's good. I think that the addition of the steel cage stipulation is to give them a little bit of room to play with some added violence and hope that carries them through. But I'm not sure. I mean, I would be more concerned about match quality against Moxley, knowing the style that he works, than I was against somebody like Claudio, who even Claudio is getting up there in age too, but still a very, very capable wrestler. And not to say Moxley isn't, it's just the style that he is choosing to work. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. A couple comments in the chat about this. Let's see. Andrew WR said, with the Death Rider standing at bay, it seems the cage is unnecessary. I don't know about that. I mean, if you have a one-on-one match, you don't have Will Hobbs standing there with a chair. So to me, the cage is just a bigger, better version of Will Hobbs with a chair to distract them. Derek Hubbard in the chat said, I understand Wade's point. Too many matches are too focused on having good action. The more important story takes a backseat to match quality on a weekly basis. To me, I mean, you want to have match quality. You want there to be a high quality to matches, but in the way you tell the story, matches are won in the canon of the universe of AEW on beating somebody up and pinning them. That's what makes you great. Not star ratings, not cheers, not this is awesome chants, not accolades. The canon is you beat somebody, and it doesn't matter how flashy it is. That doesn't make you the best wrestler. You winning the world title in the story that AEW tells and sells and headlines every pay-per-view with, the whole point of the world title, and if it's not the point, then what's the point, is the person who holds it is the best. Now, some people can say, well, the best team in the NHL that wins a President's Trophy rarely wins the Stanley Cup. Well, yeah, winning the Stanley Cup means going through 4 best of 7 series, back to back, staying healthy, playing the same team over and over again, where coaches have a chance to prepare and make counter moves, and it's a different kind of skill set to win. You also have a bunch of, not to get too into the NHL, but you have veteran players who don't try that hard in the regular season, who suddenly get a lot better in the playoffs. So a young team with a bunch of naive, 25-year-olds who are working their ass off all regular season, have the best record, are worn out. And then you get to the playoffs and the veterans step up and start trying hard, and they win. So the point is, the Stanley Cup is to find out who is the best at winning 4 7-game series. That's how we decide who the best hockey team is in the NHL, not who wins the most games in 80 out of 82, when teams aren't always trying that hard. And so to me, saying, well, Ospreay, and it carries over somewhat. Obviously, it's not a real true competitive sport in pro wrestling, but having the most exciting hockey games or the most exciting slam dunks or the most exciting catches in the NFL doesn't make you the best. It's winning the Super Bowl or the NBA Finals or the NBA Championship or the Stanley Cup or the World Series in baseball, and on and on. So that has to be the story. So stop saying the best in the world is somebody without the world title, because in a separate realm of match evaluation, Will Ospreay is seen as a better wrestler than Jon Moxley. That has nothing to do with the on-air story. I think good wrestling can be touted, but it should never be touted as the most important thing, more than winning and losing. And AEW does that a little too much. It's just obvious. If you watch AEW, there's great wrestlers. If you watch Will Ospreay and you like that style, he's great. He is top of the class. That doesn't make him the best in the AEW world, though. Winning the world title does. And you need to have that be the selling point for world title matches. That Ospreay looks like can win the world title, but he can't claim to be the best, and no one should say he's the best until he does. Brandon, any thoughts on it? Yeah.
There's this overarching notion, I think, with the way that AEW presents their product, that it's almost like they're embarrassed by the idea of kayfabe, almost. And I mean, you can argue kayfabe is dead. I mean, WWE pulls back the curtain constantly. They're going to have a show on Netflix this summer about their writing process. To an extent, it's dead. But the weekly television product at least pretends, and sometimes it doesn't feel like that is the way that AEW operates. And sometimes I think they shift in and out of it on a segment by segment basis. And that is jarring. Oftentimes you'll have something that they take very seriously, and they'll allude to the idea that wins and losses matter, championships matter, the championship determines who is the best. And then the next segment, you'll have multiple wrestlers alluding to how good the in-ring quality is. And I just don't think that anyone has to point to that, including the announcers, because it's self-evident. I mean, you can
That's exactly
watch
what
the
I was
show.
thinking. Yep.
Yeah, you can watch the show and see how good the wrestling is. And sometimes over-explaining it makes me think that they are trying to overcompensate for something.
Right. And I've said that the motto of losing wrestling companies who are distant number 2 and going down is we're the best wrestle. I mean, the NWA during the Crockett years, when they were just dying, it was NWA, we wrestle, as opposed to we sports entertain, or whatever the implication was with WWE. TNA, I know, had some model like that at one point too. It's just like, there's an audience that loves that, and they're gonna push back hard if you go, well, that's not a model that's gonna work, but it has a limit. People, the top level wrestling audience in terms of size, domestically and internationally, comes from high stakes with big stars and compelling stories. You have to have a certain baseline level of quality wrestling, and the better it is, the better. It's sort of subjective. What's better? Some would argue telling a story efficiently with fewer big spots, and what you do in between and milking moments is actually better than the high density of high spots. That's a philosophical debate for the ages. And I understand both. I have respect for both. I lean more towards efficiency of moves, making every move count more than just trying to pack in as many as possible and not selling. But, it is an art form, and different people look for different things, but you don't want to advertise that as your hook. Okay. I remember, Brandon, what I forgot to plug, which is that Greg Canner is going to be joining us as an on-site correspondent on the show tonight because he attended in person, and he has just called up, so it feels senseless to plug it because he's waiting. So let's just bring him on.
Okay. Well, I was about to give you credit, but then I realized that you only remembered because his name popped up, and so
you know what? Actually, I can't prove this, and but I did think of it while you were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt you. But I could have said I remembered it was before Greg.
You told me you were going to. You.
I did, and I chose not to because you were making a really good point.
It's not rude if you told me you were going to be rude in advance.
Is that really the rule?
I don't think so. But...
I don't think so either. So, all right. Anyway, let's bring Greg onto the show. PWTorch's own Greg Canner, welcome to the show. Greg, good to hear from you.
Hello, Wade and Brandon. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Awesome. Can you imagine the amount of viewers, the more viewers you would have had you plugged me? Because,
I know.
Skyrocketed. I can't imagine,
I know.
Yeah.
I knew earlier, it's like, I forgot to plug something that's a little out of the routine, and it drove me nuts, and then I remembered, and then I didn't have time to plug it before you came on. So, Greg, first of all, good to hear from you. You attended tonight, and you got to be in kind of a cool venue. It was built, I think, in 1926. And the chat room has a mixed opinion on the venue, but I thought it looked great. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I love this place, the Masonic Temple. I've gone to many concerts and some comedy shows there. It's beautiful. I don't know how it looked on television, though, obviously. So I don't know whether it was able to capture what was really like in there. But I thought it was great. I mean, we had great vantage points. It was pretty much great vantage points from wherever you sat. And I felt, and again, my number one question when I was going to come on was, how did the crowd sound on television? Because in there, it seemed really loud, engaged. The acoustics are fantastic in there.
Brandon, what do you think?
I thought it sounded really good. And that's been the trend with these AEW shows in theaters. I think that they have all come off really strongly on TV.
I liked also, by the way, not just the ring, Greg, and the ring entrances, and it looked like this old building, and they just leaned into it, but backstage. It just was classy. Yes. I mean, like, so many backstage arenas now. The new, is it Oracle Arena for the Clippers in LA? I mean, that's gorgeous everywhere. But most backstage areas, even of buildings built in the last 20 years, 30 years, are just, the industrial brick and, kind of, they try to, spice it up a little bit. But it looks like, and it's fine. I mean, it's backstage, doesn't have to be camera ready. But the amount of, like, classy, like, carved doors and, I mean, everything just looked like a really nice, like, old hotel, even in the backstage area. And they use that setting to their advantage.
Oh, for sure. And so you're saying you don't like the random staircases and cinder block look?
I mean, I actually am not super against it. I mean, there's something about backstage should be kind of gritty and utilitarian. I don't like the acoustics. I think they need to, if they do that, they need to bring in some acoustic panels. They're cheap. They're on Amazon. And for $1,000, Tony Khan can make a show sound a lot better. And it's very portable. That's been less of a problem recently, but every once in a while that creeps up. But yeah, it was fun. And I mean, if you can't draw 10,000 people, then maybe run smaller buildings. This place holds about 4,600 for concerts. They had about almost up to 3,000 in the building. We don't have the final number. They had over 2,500 earlier this week. They're set up for about 3,000. So it's a good intimate setting, and you get a good just a good vibe from it. So, Greg, what stood out to you in terms of the in-person experience at this show? Talk more.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know what to expect for the show. I was very
Did we lose Greg? Greg, I'll send the background noise one way. I don't know if you went through a tunnel or.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
lost
I'm driving home.
Reception. Greg, are you there?
Here?
I'm not hearing Greg, so I'm waiting to see if it comes back on. Otherwise, he might have to call us back.
He's coming in. He's going in and out.
Brandon, can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
Now I hear him. That's my fault.
Okay.
Greg, now that was my fault all along. I ended up accidentally muting everything in my headset.
Okay.
So I'm happy to hear it's my fault. I will take full blame for that careless error in causing confusion. Greg, go ahead and answer my question since I probably talked over you as you started answering it already.
Yeah. Basically, I didn't know what to expect coming in because I as I'd complained about on my writing and on the podcast, All Elite Conversation Club, that they did such a poor job of promoting this in Detroit the first time they were going to be back here in 2 years. And I was so disappointed. Last week we didn't even have any matches, and then they ended up naming 2 matches, which were, okay and worth it for kind of the hardcores. But I'll tell you, it was probably about 90% or so full. There were definitely some seats in the upper deck area in the back that were empty. And I thought if they would have come out and said, you're going to see Hangman and Ospreay face to face, you're going to see, the Hurt Syndicate, live. You can, all this other stuff leading up to it. I think they would have easily sold the rest of the place out. That would have been, even better. But I thought what they were able to provide us was a pretty good show. I mean, there were no lulls really the whole time. It was they kept things moving, and there was, the crowd was really into it. I think you could tell it had been a couple of years since they were in the area, because the people who were there were really into everything, from start to finish.
Brandon, go ahead and ask a question of Gregg.
Yeah, I mean, like I alluded to at the start, there were strong responses throughout the night. I thought that the crowd really held up their end from start to finish. Is there one particular wrestler that you thought really stood out? Somebody that just was head and shoulders above everyone else in terms of just pure connection, overness?
Yeah, I'll give you 2. I'll give you one from each side. Granted it was the beginning of the show, but when Ospreay's music hit, that was the biggest pop of the night for me. And I even got, some chills, which is because he's, my favorite guy to watch. I was hoping he would be there. And I think everyone else was kind of, since they didn't know, was hoping he would be there. And that eruption was very loud. But they were into so many of the baby faces too, which was great to see. But on the other side, the Don Callis hatred was just chef's kiss, wonderful. I mean, for the first time in probably, I don't know, months and months, that he seemed to be booed, where you could barely hear him. And that hadn't happened on television in quite a while. And so that really came across to us in the building, that he really got the good heat, as did Christian, who cut a promo during a commercial break to get some extra heat as well. So that was solid reactions as well.
Was there any point they lost the crowd at all?
The only time where I thought it dipped slightly, and I wouldn't use the word lost, but dipped slightly, was the Okada match, because I think people were anticipating Kevin Knight kind of doing his thing, and because of the pre-match attack, it was more plotting and not as much, as the high flying that you would have expected. But, Okada, that was another thing that was interesting. Okada still gets huge cheers. People want to love him, and watch him and appreciate him. And it just kind of goes back and forth, because they're going to cheer him. You even hear some Okada chants, and then he'll do something, heel-like, and then they'll boo a little bit. And then they'll kind of come back to loving it, because they just love seeing him. He's in such a bad spot right now, and it's going to take a little work. I mean, obviously Kenny Omega is a big deal, and if that's where they're going to go for All In, the Omega and Okada, they'll have to do a little work to kind of make, Omega the true, 100% babyface for that, because people still love Okada.
Okada, I just think, is having a blast doing what he's doing. I mean, when Knight was getting beat up, he's just standing there and he's like, oh, I'm making the face, like the pouty lips. Oh, this is so sad to watch, but I'm kind of also enjoying it. Oh, he might not be able to put up a good fight. Like, I don't sense at all Okada's not enjoying the hell out of what he's doing. Wrestlers, they're artists, they're performers. They want to do something interesting. And I don't know that he wanted to be Mr. Serious centerpiece. I'm not advocating for it in terms of that being the best way for Okada to make AEW the most money, but we shouldn't feel sorry for Okada personally, I don't think, because this is what he wanted to do, and he does seem to enjoy doing it. The fact that he continues to get a big crowd response, as you point out, Gregg, it doesn't mean that he's still going to draw as much money for them as if he was a more serious character, but maybe they can get there. Certainly, that's the story that they want to tell going into the summer. King of Strong Style in the chat said, this fantasy that Okada and Kenny are going to recreate 2018 just isn't going to happen. they're setting people up for disappointment.
Yeah, he's certainly not mailing it in. I mean, he's definitely, going all into the character that they gave him. It just seems miscast.
Yeah. So, in terms of the MVP MJF segment, do you think they got the response that they wanted? Was the crowd really engaged in it? There was a little bit of punting to next week on certain things, but it seemed like the crowd was okay with that. The Callis Tag Team Challenge. Obviously, they're hyping a world title match, which is bigger than Claudio Joe. And then the Lashley decision. There might have been other things, too, that were, very explicit, like we could do it today, but we're not. But did the crowd overall react the way you think they ought to be? Did it seem like the crowd was engaged and interested?
Yeah, I think, going in, I was hopeful. It was it didn't seem right to all of a sudden, have MJF come and beat some people up, and then all of a sudden, all 3 thumbs up. I mean, there was some chance for 3 thumbs up afterwards. But the crowd was very engaged with Hurt Syndicate. They love them. They're the We Hurt People chants constantly. And they also love MJF. And so you're kind of in that situation where the crowd wants them to get together. They seemed okay with, it being, continuing because they got to see MJF live. Now, again, another thing about them not promoting a lot of stuff is that there were surprises that we weren't sure we were going to get. So that maybe added to some of the reactions that you're like, oh, good, MJF's here. Oh, you kind of expected it once you saw Top Flight come out, and you were kind of waiting for it, but until you got it, they weren't sure. And then people love MJF, and the one fear I continue to have is if MJF joins, I just make sure they stay serious and not go down the goofy backstage promos or out of the arena promos where MJF is goofing on him, and it's like the Adam Cole stuff. As long as they keep it serious, I think they got something going.
What, Greg, what's the crowd reaction for Rhino tonight? I mean, it came across on TV like they thought it was kind of cool to have this, veteran of the hardcore style there. Or did it seem like everybody knew who he was, or was there only a section that did?
Oh yeah, no, everybody knew Rhino, and it's funny enough, I actually met him last week. He actually came into my TV station to promote. He has an indie thing going last weekend. He came in to promote that, and then he was also back this week to promote AEW. So I actually got to meet him, and I sat in on like maybe a 5-minute conversation he was having with some other people. Very nice, very cordial. So and
yeah, he's so the opposite of some of his on air. He's very much just like this, kind, friendly, soft-spoken guy. It almost feels forced when he's trying to be all, I'm a Rhino.
Yeah, well, it was funny. Yeah, I mean, and he got a great reaction, and people loved him. Some great chants, and they were pretty mad when he just lost like so abruptly. You were kind of looking at that like you were expecting Christian to get involved in some way or to cost him or do something, but for it to be clean was a shock, and there was a BS chant after that. I don't know if that was heard, but and so so it was. But that's they got what they wanted, and I think he's coming back tomorrow to do something. So maybe maybe he'll get the win tomorrow.
Brandon, anything else you want to ask Greg about the event?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about or quite a bit about Okada. I want to bring up somebody who he's closely involved with. The Young Bucks had a strong trios match on this show, by all accounts, but there's something about their act since they've returned. It's a continuation of what they were doing prior to the 6-month vacation or whatever you want to call it, where there's been no adjustment to their in-ring style, and they were working a fast-paced, just flurry of high-flying offense in this trios match that the crowd was going crazy for, and I don't, I certainly don't fault them for reacting to that, seeing it live in person. But did you find that there is still heel heat for the Bucks by and large throughout the crowd, or are they just enamored with watching them wrestle? And so I guess what I'm getting at is there still that disconnect that exists with the Young Bucks character right now?
I think a little bit. I think that there is, people love the spots and they love that match was a lot of fun. And, and they were trying to, they'll do some unbelievably great moves and get get a lot of applause. And then they'll do something like, I don't know if the camera was on it, but they'll do something on the apron or something to kind of like try to get some heat back as well. So they're kind of going back and forth throughout a match because they are, that's their style. It's always been their style. It will always be their style. So it's kind of been hard for them to, to they're not going to wrestle in that like old school, like Mick Foley. I'm anything you want to see me do, heel stuff.
They're not going to be FTR.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so there is something with their characters that just doesn't hit perfectly, but people still like to see them, and I think that they play along, to a point. They'll boo them and all that because they want to. Then they'll get behind, Swerve and the rest of the baby faces to get the better of them, and they love jeering Ricochet. I mean, that's gold right there. He's found something perfect that works great, and I'm not one who's going to chant bald because I got some thinning hair going on, and I feel bad for the poor guy. Not all of us can have that young buck's hair, but I think they are who they are, and I don't think they're going to really change.
Yeah, they feel to me, Wade, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, that line that I think AEW sometimes fails to walk with presenting a product that exists, the 2 hours exist within kayfabe. It feels like, with the Young Bucks, because people know who they are outside of wrestling, what they bring or what they brought to the creation of the formation of AEW, there is this certain sense of, oh yeah, you're cute heels, like we will kind of play along, but also you wrestle this style that is pure babyface, and we're going to pop for your moves.
Yeah, that's an ongoing challenge with I mean, both Moxley and Bucks have similar problems when they're trying to be heels. I think the Bucks this time around though are I think they've found a lane in terms of their heel characters right now that feels like they kind of know their voice and what they're going for. Gregg, did you get an appearance from Tony Khan tonight?
Oh, we sure did. He was great. I mean, he came on after the show, and in his typical, Tony way, thanked everyone profusely for coming. You do feel like he means it. He's not just trying to hype you up because the show's over. And he said we're so glad to be back, in Detroit, and he after the expected pay-per-view chant, he's promised a future pay-per-view, but they have to find a bigger building, is what he said. So, and he just seemed genuinely, appreciative of the people. Told everyone, please come back tomorrow, and that was it. And then afterwards, he kind of hung around, and talked to some fans as we were filing out. You could see him just chatting with all the fans in the front row areas, and and that was it. Now, there wasn't one time where he's trying to get some cheers and he starts like pumping his fists in a really kind of cartoony, goofy way that is just Tony. So it's just, you just kind of roll your eyes a little bit, but he's passionate.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, that definitely comes through. Gregg, anything else you want to bring up from the show tonight?
Let me see. Not really, and I'm not going to follow that up with anything.
All right.
Not really is it. I thought it was a very good show, and I wish they would have promoted it a little better. It's basically, what I was thinking.
Yeah, Gregg, tell people how they can hear and read more from you.
Yes, week. Well, I write the Dynamite Hits and Misses every week. I won't be able to get that to you until probably tomorrow night or Friday morning. I apologize, but going to the show tonight, I got an early day at work. Please don't fire me for that. And every Friday, Joel Donnell and I record our All Elite Conversation Club podcast, which is a lot of fun. Joel and I have a blast just chatting and about everything AEW, and we've got some quality people writing into the mailbag, and Zach Barber, of course, giving us his trivia every week, very creative trivia that we do our best not to embarrass ourselves with, and it's a lot of fun, and that comes out every Friday.
Excellent, Greg. Thanks for calling in and checking in. We look forward to your hits and misses, your written take on tonight's show. Lady, do you plan to watch the TV show back?
I'm going to watch some of the show, at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to do that, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm definitely curious to see how certain things. Plus, I didn't get to hear commentary, so it's always curious to hear what they're saying, and some of the stuff that it was so loud we couldn't hear a couple of the backstage things because the crowd was just engaged, and it was a little hard. But
sure, yeah. Excellent. All right, Greg, thanks. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you another time.
All right, take care, guys.
You bet. All right, Brandon. We talked a little bit about MJF and Hurt Syndicate. Everyone's want to call them Hurt Business. I apologize if I don't catch myself. To just elaborate with not from the on-site perspective, crowd reaction stuff. What do you think about the direction that they've taken and basically saying next week will be the week that there's a decision? I'll say as an aside, I thought the whole lawyer telling Lashley not to talk was stupid backstage. Lashley said, I'm going to say next week. Why? Because he gets approached by an interviewer. Would he suddenly say what he said? He's going to wait and he's going to make MJF wait a week. But then someone says, why don't you just tell us now? And he's going to, except for lawyer advice. I mean, it's just low IQ dribble nonsense. I don't.
And why would a lawyer advise that? What does that
exactly? Yeah. And why would an interviewer who works for the company spoil a hook for next week? I mean, it was really stupid. It was just like, how does that make air? Like, I mean, you watch the show and like, that was well done. That was well done. That was well done. How does that make air? Like in 4 ways, it makes no sense. Anyway, I don't want to over slam them too hard for it, but come on, like honestly, like be better. Go ahead.
No, I like what they're doing with MJF, and part of the reason for that is because it feels to me quite often that AEW has a plethora of main event level talent, right? And there's only so many guys that can be at the top of the card at any given time. And during this Jon Moxley title reign, they have cycled in a lot of non-main event opponents for him. A lot of those guys have been, mid-card, upper mid-card. Looking back at Jay White, for example, and at Orange Cassidy, they're guys who flirt with the main event but aren't really there full time. So you have someone like MJF, who is a main event character by all stretch, and so often with those characters, your Will Ospreays, your Kenny Omegas, guys like that, your MJFs, it feels like if they're not at the top of the card doing something significant in the main event, then they're kind of spinning their wheels a little bit, and they're just being thrown into good matches, and that's fine for some characters. But I like to see something decidedly different, especially for someone like MJF, who is not someone who they have wrestle on TV every week or even every other week. So
or every 3 months, even.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go on.
Yeah. So to get him in an angle that is, it's at a mid card. It's at a mid card level. It's the tag team division, but it feels well developed. It feels like there's a lot of thought and care and energy put into this. It feels like MJF is really invested in the story that they're telling. It doesn't feel like he's phoning it in on a weekly basis. So even if it started, it felt a little out of left field to me, like pairing MJF with these guys. And I don't know how it ends up, but I've enjoyed the ride that they've taken us on. I hope that we get some legitimate answers next week and they don't just punt down the road. But where do you, Wade, think that this, do you think that they accept him into the fold, or is this more of the mark of the Hurt Syndicate's full face turn? What are they? I don't know. That's the hang up that I have.
I lean a little more towards they don't accept him and it turns into a feud quickly. I'm less against him being in it for a while, as long as Shelton and Bobby seem like they see MJF for what he is, are willing to use him. They're willing to be clever about it. MVP has a little loyalty to MJF based on their history, but even he starts to see MJF a little more clearly with little, elbow nudges by Shelton and Lashley going, do you see what this guy's all about? But maybe they think they can use him or just humiliate him. The problem is you don't want Hurt Syndicate winning matches because of MJF if they're a babyface act, and they ought to be a babyface act. So my leaning ultimately, even though I think there's a little bit of room for MJF to be with them for a period of time, short or long has some danger. It's dangerous if he's with them a long time. It can mess with things. And we don't need to see the Adam Cole MJF. We don't need to see them going on a comedy picnic excursion with a storyline being the ants ruined the picnic, or there was, I mean, just don't rein it in. You can brainstorm a bunch of dumb ideas. It doesn't mean they need to be produced and put on air. So my thinking is, and I don't know if Jason Powell mentioned this in ProWrestling.net, that Cedric's contract, his non-compete expires by next week. So we could see a tease. I hope this isn't too spoilery. I almost feel like I shouldn't say it but I have no inside information it's going to happen. It just happens to line up. He could, Lashley could go, we are going to add a member, and MJF celebrates. And then he says it's Cedric, and Cedric comes out. So, I use that illustratively and specifically. It could be a twist where they. And
do you think that if that is the route that they take, given the way that the crowd has been reacting, they boo MJF, but they also still do the he's our scumbag bit.
Right.
There still is a love and appreciation there for him. It has seemed to me pretty consistently that the crowd is hoping that they accept him. So
yes. And it's
if they don't, you know where I'm going with it.
It's MJF's job more than anyone's to make sure that he steers them away, like Paul Heyman did masterfully on Raw, get the crowd to stop cheering him and Seth. They're still cheering Seth a little, but I mean, they need to, singing Seth's music in a way that makes Seth's music seem uncool. And Heyman doing more than just you suck in your whatever. He effectively, I think, got the crowd. He sent the signal in a meta way. If you respect me and like me, start booing me. Start booing us. Even in a meta sense, he's like, you're not doing me any favors by cheering me. And by the way, that's how high IQ heels in pro wrestling feel. They want to be booed. They don't want you to rebelliously cheer them. That some like that. They think, hey, look, I'm over. But no, you're failing at your job if you're a heel and the crowd is cheering you. So Heyman gets that. I hope MJF not only gets it, I assume he does, even if it's been a bumpy ride some of the time in the, some of the catchphrases have caught on, but you have to overcome catchphrases. I mean, that's a whole larger issue. I don't want to get into it today. We did last week, I think specifically mostly on the Raw Post show, how fan participation and catchphrases, the whole participation communal experience is overriding the immersive storyline, emotional pro and con, cheer, boo of heels. And I think it's something that's worth deliberately trying to mitigate. If you're a pro wrestling company right now, try to get fans back into booing and cheering and not just into, hey, it's fun to sing the song with a bunch of fellow pro wrestling fans, which it is. I just don't think that's the peak experience for pro wrestling, is going there to sing with sing-alongs and chant-alongs. I think you want people to be invested in the ebb and flow of a match, as we've seen with Cody and Sammy and Jey Uso as baby faces. Those are the peak moments in WWE, not singing for Seth's song, for instance, or chanting along. So with MJF and Hurt Syndicate, their goal should not be to entertain people or get a crowd response. It should be more refined. We want to be entertaining. We want to get a crowd response, but only in the context of, if Hurt Syndicate rejects MJF, meticulously, fastidiously figure out how to make sure that you do everything you can, and don't be hack about it and insult the local sports team. None of that nonsense. But in the end, set it up so that you're confident you've done everything you can to get the crowd to boo MJF and cheer Hurt Syndicate, whatever that angle is, when they don't go together. And it's not our job to figure it out. They got 6 days and 22 hours a week to figure it out before they go live in between Dynamites. So spend the time doing that. Derek Mitchell in the chat, by the way, Brandon, says, are we supposed to believe MJF beating up Top Flight is supposed to make a light bulb go off in Bobby Lashley's head, lighting MJF in the group? So the point is I just, I get the point. It's not an unfair question. But I think Bobby just wanted, we beat people up. They beat up those people cheering them last week in another dumb segment on Dynamite. It's like haha laughs and no ramifications. It was pointless. But the idea is they like to beat people up. That's what that was there for, to play into that. Again, it's to get chance and get that over. But Lashley apparently likes to watch people get beat up too, or if someone's going to be in their group, he wants them to be able to beat people up indiscriminately. It wasn't so much indiscriminately. They were challenging Hurt Syndicate for a match. So, I mean, Lashley gave MJF a job. Are you willing to do it? Of course, MJF did it. I think the idea is it still won't be enough, and they'll pull the rug out from under MJF, and he'll throw a fit and be mad. But I think, yes, we're supposed to think Lashley was impressed that MJF brutally beat up these two guys. Brandon.
The thing that I took away from that more than anything was just how and I realized that they needed to go with a lower end tag team for MJF to quickly dispatch, but it kind of goes to show you how thin they are in the tag division right now, or at least thin in ways that they're willing to present against the Hurt Syndicate. And I think that's hurting the act overall, because really the way that the Hurt Syndicate has gotten over and the way that they're presented really should be like the burgeoning of a huge resurgence for the AEW tag team division, which was once really, really impressive and was main eventing shows for very good reason. And it feels like it could be back there if only they could develop some real credible challengers.
Yeah. And it was. They were. I mean, I like that Top Flight said we haven't been doing very well lately. This is our chance. We when we get knocked down, we get back up. I mean, at least they owned the reality of their situation. Okay. Zach, I'm sorry for not getting to the super chat sooner. I was going to, and then Greg Cantor called in when I was about to pivot to it, but we'll get to it now. And he's got a point. He says, after Hangman's promo, I feel vindicated. Everything I said about Hangman's arc was correct. Yeah, I watched Hangman talk. I'm like, we're going to hear from Zach tonight with, when I told you so. I loved Hangman's promo. I mean, I think if that's a story he wants people to believe he was telling all along, I think there was some crowd reaction that led to steering it maybe in some other directions. But they point by point plucked from history, Hangman's history, this sequence of events that leads to the stage that he's at. There's sort of, don't bring up the bad stuff that doesn't fit with the babyface character. And my philosophy is, if you can't own it and talk about it, don't do it in the first place. I sort of am sympathetic too if we look back and go, yeah, that was a hack hot shot move. Fourth grader saying, wouldn't it be cool if someone burned someone's house down? Like, then let's do it. Let's put on national TV. It was overdone. It was, over the top. But I think they found a way to acknowledge it so they're not running from it and make it, perpetual canon, like, in the dynamic of Swerve and Hangman, and also Hangman's journey. So yeah, I like this a lot. I like the Hangman part of it. I like the Ospreay part of the opening segment too. We easily could have led our post show with this and done a whole segment on it, and continue to talk about it. But what do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I thought that this was probably my favorite part of the show. If we're just talking about overall development and what it did for shows coming up down the road. I think both Hangman and Ospreay are two guys that this company should be heavily focused on. I mean, I've said how many times on this show AEW needs to be in the Will Ospreay business. It seems like they're finally starting to get there. And Hangman's not a guy that I view, terribly far behind him. I want to see Hangman in the top 5 of this company on a regular basis, and a lot of that has to do with the incredible natural connection that he's built with the audience. Even as a heel, people were just fully invested in him because he's got this natural charisma and connection. And I thought his justification, his explanation tonight was really, really good. I said that they had a really long way to get to a point where I would feel like it wouldn't be just a complete disservice to their own canon for Hangman and Swerve to team up to take on somebody like the Young Bucks, for example. And I thought that they have laid the foundation for that exceptionally well and gotten to a point where it would no longer seem like it was just completely out of left field and unfathomable for it to happen. So yeah, I mean,
but they had the tension there, the get your hand off me, the face to face, the off. I like the off mic comments. Mm-hmm. It is it's a begrudging alliance. Mm-hmm. And in what I wrote this in my report at PWTorch.com covering Dynamite, I liked that Ospreay was blunt, but not like he walked up the line, but he wasn't like disrespectfully dismissive or critical or disrespectful of Hangman. He spoke the truth, and there are different ways you can interpret or Like, I think some people are going to be okay with Hangman's rationalization and explanation, and others will see Ospreay as going, yeah, but that's not enough for me to still want him to win the title because your redemption isn't going to get in the way of my ascension. I thought that was a great line. It defines their match. It defines a fork in the road for AEW's future. Everyone is assuming Ospreay's going to win and go on, but I when I say everybody, I think people who watch a show like this, listen to a podcast like this, that's what they're thinking. I think AEW is hopefully has more fans than those who are, so into it that they're just like figuring out the booking and decoding the booking. They're just along for the ride. If you're just along for the ride, not to be, Triple H sort of said that, be along for the ride, folks. Stop being super critical, but it came across defensive and thin-skinned. And you have to be careful when you're in a position of power to do that. But there are those fans out there who do that. There's always going to be fans who don't. You got to live with that if you're in the public eye. But the ones who are doing it, I don't think it's a given. I don't think people, the more I'm along for the ride fan who tunes in and watches for 2 or 4 hours a week and doesn't think about it much otherwise and doesn't, do shoulder content and listen to reviews, I think they're thinking Hangman might win. That'd be a hell of a match, beating up Moxley. So you want to tell, if it's feasible, and it is, tell the story and do it believably. So yeah, I thought Ospreay showed really good fire. Decline in the chat says Hangman continued to be the most compelling guy in the show. That said, I loved Ospreay's fire tonight. So Brandon, just some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that you can certainly, I wouldn't disagree with the notion that Hangman is a stronger promo overall than Ospreay, but I think Ospreay has really come along quite a bit since joining AEW. Really, I think he's shown a lot of improvement there and shown that he's ready to take that next step. But I mean, they have two legitimate top baby faces who are ready to go and carry the company. I mean, this is a good problem to have. If one of them happens to go down, to injury for any length of time, you can easily see the other guy step in. I am ready for one of them to step into that role. I think that we're past the point of needing to see that happen.
At the top of the show, when you said you're down on the main event scene, I was like, oh, did you not like Hangman and Ospreay? But you made really clear you're talking about Moxley.
Yeah.
And so because the main event scene, I wouldn't say it's an embarrassment of riches. It's just, but it's healthy. There's some healthy options. Kenny and Okada, I think we've figured out they're going to be in the legends category. You've got Ospreay on the ascent. Hangman's going to be trying to think of a wrestler to compare him to, but he's going to be the wrestler who doesn't need the championship to still be beloved and integral in what AEW is doing. So I think we're kind of seeing that play. And then MJF, he's still he'll be wanting him to be in the world title scene, but he's got to make himself relevant and compelling when he's not.
Swerve.
And then Swerve is kind of like another guy who you can imagine with the world title having a nice run, and that might happen. But that's you got to find worthwhile things for them to do, and you can't just create titles so everybody has a belt and think, "We'll see, now we solved the problem."
You need to get rid of titles.
I know. Fact. Yeah, I would not mind that at all. Anything else you want to say about Ospreay and Hangman and Zach being taking a victory lap on the promo?
No, I think we covered it. Like I said, my favorite part of the show.
Yep. All right, so let me go to JB's email because he's good at bringing things up that we don't necessarily get to in our main conversations, and we'll see what he has to say here. So first, he says, JB from Detroit says, I was supposed to be live attending both Dynasty tonight and Collision tomorrow in Detroit, but unfortunately my work called me last night and informed me I'd have to go out of town for the next 2 days to visit a client. I was going to be an on-site correspondent. I will say that the Masonic Temple is an incredibly unique and historic venue in Detroit that I've seen many concerts at, and I had a friend attend the show tonight who told me the crowd was hot from start to finish, including the pre-show stuff from ROH. The earnest of Hangman's promo in the way he is connecting with the crowds is second to none right now. He might be my current favorite story in pro wrestling. The first ever Ospreay Hangman face-off had just the right anticipation, and I felt the excitement and gravity of it, as did the crowd. I know we just said we were done talking about it, and now I'm going to throw to you on this, or I'm going to comment at least. I like that Hangman didn't feel the need to yell and hit like bug-eyed intensity and like his story's compelling. And I think when he's reserved and you can tell there's like, he's not, what I want to feel with Hangman is that he's telling us a story from the heart, but he's not trying to perform it in a over the top way. And people compliment his promos when he's backstage. He's like, he's all, red faced and bug eyed. And I don't want that out of him. I mean, once a year, every year and a half, there's going to be a moment, but I just like that. I felt like I was hearing somebody talk to me respectfully from the heart, and it was believable, and it sold me more. It was more immersive.
He radiates an emotional intelligence that I think is rare of pro wrestlers.
Yep.
I think that's the best way I could describe it.
And a vulnerability, but also there's determination, there's introspection. He's aspirational, but willing to admit his insecurities and his mistakes, even when there's ridiculous things AEW did in Canada that he has to sort of work into his character. He did a good job with it tonight.
It never feels like there's lapses in his judgment. I mean, you may disagree with his actions when he's a heel, but his motivations and his reasoning is always very clearly laid out and justified to him.
Yes. Derek Mitchell in the chat says, Hangman Page seems like the only character that has a strong story arc and the fans have an emotional investment in him, not just to win matches, but in his overall character.
Yeah, I think that really stands out in AEW too.
Yep. All right. Let's see here. Okay. JB's next point. Ospreay was not outdone by Hangman as it related to their promos tonight. Hangman definitely won the crowd over as he spoke first. Then Ospreay reined them right back in with his believable conviction and passion. This is going to be one of those rare face-to-face matchups that really works because they're two totally different kinds of baby faces. Absolutely. Yeah. Just well put. I agree. I thought that it was a wise idea to bring in the Callis family to take away from the tension of the crowd having to choose between Hangman and Ospreay. It's a very good point. I'm glad JB brought that up. Hangman Ospreay tagging for the first time ever next week against the Callis family certainly has a must-see feel already. Yeah, I mean, I thought Callis was good. I mean, I don't know if I like Callis just having this mishmash faction that's going to be there to do a job in all likelihood to Hangman and Ospreay. Not that there's any shame in doing that, but it feels... I don't know. I mean, I don't have a big problem with it. It's just like, I guess I'd rather the Callis family be... It feels like this motley crew that's undefined, and we don't really have enough idea of how Josh Alexander feels about Lance Archer and how Lance Archer feels. It's just not there. They're just sort of standing around, and they're pawns to be thrown into a match. So that's the downside, Brandon.
I would almost prefer at this point that Callis just represent Fletcher and Takeshita and just call it good. I think that the inclusion of these periphery characters who are sometimes featured on television but sometimes not drag the overall prestige of the group down. I think focus on the two really, really good wrestlers and don't even necessarily, team them up, put them together. They can occasionally help each other out when Callis calls for it, but just have Callis manage these two guys separately.
Yeah. The idea of Callis having an it's tough with Takeshita and Fletcher because they're both sort of like up and coming heavyweight world title contender level guys. But if Cage and Archer had stayed healthy and promoted as a tag team, and they protected them and didn't just have them do designated jobs and singles matches, also, I think that could have worked. I think Trent and Rocky just comes across as just some extra pawns to do job. I don't know. Yeah, it's just I think it
just doesn't feel. It just
Yeah, and then Josh Alexander, what's that about? Why? I mean, he was a big debut. He's gotten a big push in TNA for years, and then suddenly shows up, and he's just this sort of relatively short guy standing blocked by Don Callis in the background with no character development. I think they're defining him down by having him just stand in the background like that.
Yeah, I go back to just I think just wanting him to be associated with the two guys who they clearly have plans for. And the others can kind of fall by the wayside. I do understand the hesitation, the reservation there, because if you compare it to something like this new group with Paul Heyman, he's managing or advocating for Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker, and they are at two clearly defined different levels. Seth is the established main event act. Braun Breaker is the up and coming main event act. Whereas Takeshita and Fletcher, like you said, are very much right now at the same place on the card. They're seen in similar places, and so it's harder to differentiate and to make it seem, if they're competing for the same spot on the card, then at some point it would stand to reason that Callis is going to have to advocate against one of them in favor of the other. So I get the issue there, but it just seems like a collection of randoms.
Yeah, it is. It's a collection of randoms. And the dynamic with Heyman and Seth Rollins and Braun Breaker is being defined. Seth is the architect, been WrestleMania main eventer, been world champion, been in the Shield. And then you have Braun, this up-and-coming, just badass, who's going to be mentored by Heyman. There's a differentiation there, but there is the tension of there might be a point where Heyman has to choose sides, or one of them gets jealous or anxious about the other getting too many opportunities. I'd like to see Callis go, let's one up that, or let's match it. Let's do this with Takeshita and Fletcher and tell that story. But that also means you got to have something for Josh Alexander to do, and then also probably means define Lance Archer in a way. He's the bodyguard. He's he's an enforcer type guy. And what makes him, you don't have to just inherit what he was in New Japan, or you can have him rechristen him. You can rechristen him as something that makes sense. He's always right there next to Callis, protecting Callis, which gives Callis the bravery to say what he says with no editing and no fear. That can be the story. But then what's Josh Alexander's role? If he's going to be in the group, that should have been thought about, and we should know it by now, or we should, if not, know it very soon. And then, Romero and Trent just feel extra. So prove us wrong. Make that a dynamic group where there's that bloodline-like interaction and segments. I mean, some will groan when I say it, but like the Judgment Day, what JD McDonough's role is, and Carlito's role, and Finn Balor and Dom. I mean, it's like the dynamic there. They reinforce it every week. There's something new. You can put new in quotes because sometimes they're just reinforcing something, or some would say belaboring a point until the calendar matches the point in the story where they want to take it to the next level. But AEW can do that. If you're in the Don Callis family business, then put them in segments and let's see them interact with each other, not just stand behind him, where it's clear no thought's been put into any of them. All Callis cares about is getting his promo out, his lines in. And it's good. Want him to talk, but let's show that there's some thought put into this other stuff. All right. Up next from JB. I thought it was a bit dumb to have Tony Storm in a Fatal 4-Way title eliminator. If Tony Storm had won, who would have been her opponent at Double or Nothing? Would she simply not have had one? I'd actually have been okay with Storm winning and not having a title match at Double or Nothing, but rather having a higher profile tag match with Thunder Rosa as the newly formed occasional team of Thunder Tits. Brandon, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought the match was good, but this suffered from, I think, one of the quirks with AEW booking that I don't care for. I'm not a big fan of the eliminator matches because it sort of puts you in the situation where either the champion is going to eat a pin to lead to a title defense, or they're just going to win a non-title match. So just call it a match. Just call it a non-title match. And in this particular instance, I disliked it even more because the idea here was that someone could earn a shot at Tony Storm's title by not pinning Tony Storm in a match that Tony Storm was in, which to me doesn't prove anything or prove that you are worthy of a championship match. So from a booking perspective, I was glad at least that Tony won this so that we didn't get a stupid explanation for a title shot down the road. Otherwise, action was good, but I agree with the general point here. There was a lot going on. The interference was a lot. There was, several different stories intertwined that didn't necessarily need to be, or that didn't necessarily further anyone's placement on the card. So could have done without the setup in general. Thought the action was good.
Yep. All right. Next from JB. When I I skipped one. Does Bobby Lashley continually kicking the can down the road for MJF run the risk of turning MJF more into the face and Lashley hurts Syndicate more the heels in the storyline in the immediate? If so, is that okay? If it's only for the temporary before the likely MJF turn on Hurt Syndicate. You do not want MJF outsmarting Hurt Syndicate. Hurt Syndicate are baby faces. MVP's got to protect himself as being straight smart to MJF's con. Once it becomes apparent that's what's going on here, as Shelton and Bobby obviously believe to some degree. So I think the idea is Lashley's torturing MJF. He's stringing him along. And I don't think that'll turn MJF babyface because he'll be outmaneuvered and then fans can laugh at MJF throwing a fit over it. And it, if Cedric shows up, I mean, it sort of like it gives MJF a reason for raging, like just wait, I wanted to be that guy. Even though Cedric would play different, Cedric would probably team with Shelton in the tag team division. Speaking of fortifying the tag team division or strengthening it, and then Bobby can just be a world title guy, and that'll define that group more, which would be good. Doesn't have to be Cedric, but if it's not MJF and I think they should add someone else, so they can have a clear tag team and a clear world champion level competitor, and someone clearly to face MJF one-on-one on a pay-per-view. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Brandon, it does run the risk, but again, if they do their job well, it ought not happen. It shouldn't happen.
Yeah, it's all about how MJF handles it. I mean, it's kind of what we talked about when we were talking about this segment in detail, the idea that because the crowd is invested in the notion of MJF joining them, if they reject him, does that make them more of the heel in this scenario? And I think that all depends on how nasty and vile MJF is in the follow-up. I mean, he has to get under the fans' skin in a way that will ensure that they continue to side with the Hurt Syndicate.
Yep. And I think, the crowd wants to cheer Hurt Syndicate, and it's going to be a big pain to get them to do anything else. Then lean into that and be consistent with it. And the key to that is don't muddy the waters with MJF. Be clear about how you want fans to react, and don't do things that send people in the wrong direction. Okay. I assume the Death Rider surprising the Elite in their locker room is planting the seeds for it will likely be the Anarchy in the Arena match at Double or Nothing. They could have lit them up better. I had to kind of like lean in and go, oh, it's Moxley and his crew. But yeah, I mean, they just kind of floated it out there. Any thoughts on that, Brandon?
Seems like a kind of a token match they do at Double or Nothing. And without an obvious world title challenger for Moxley, it seems like they're burning that off with Joe on TV rather than doing it at the pay-per-view. So yeah, I mean, it seems like the Death Riders will be doing Anarchy in the Arena with the Bucks.
Yeah. All right. When I heard Rhino had been booked for Dynamite and Collision to Detroit, I was sure that he would be answering Max Caster's open challenge. But I like even more how he was used to further the patriarchy angle tonight. He's able to get more massive heat on Nick Wayne, and he had a fun hometown nostalgia pop. He did his job and was used perfectly. I still think that Rhino answers Caster's open challenge on Collision tomorrow to give the crowd the warm and fuzzies. It'd be good for Rhino to get a win back after putting Nick over pretty clean. It wasn't the smoothest of matches, but it was fine tonight. But yeah, he should. I'd like that. Give Rhino a little feel good moment. That's where Caster is now. He's just fodder. Comedy fodder, and I think he probably could have been more, but maybe I was wrong. And the patriarchy too. So comment on that. The Christian, like, I'm going to wrap the belt around your waist. No, I'm not. I'm going to pull it away and drop it in front of you and leave. Well, what do you make of the psychology? What do you make of the story that they've told? Comes across to me like they've kind of changed direction as they've gone, or decided we got something here we can stretch out in a good way, not a bad way.
Yeah, I think as far as the Rhino appearance, taking that first, I thought this was a really good use of him. I think it's the exact thing that you want to do with somebody at Rhino's level at this stage of his career. Bring him in for a nice hometown pop, and put over the heel. Get your weekly talent over. And so I think that worked quite well. And I'm also fine with the notion of giving Rhino a win back on Collision. That certainly works fine and would wrap up his weekend or week with AEW in Detroit quite well. As for the patriarchy stuff, I think it's fine. I mean, it doesn't jump off the page to me. It's not something that I look forward to each and every week, but I think that they're telling an intriguing enough story. I mean, I wish that they would keep I understand why they wanted to get this on Dynamite specifically because of the involvement of Rhino, and it made sense here. But again, I wish that there was a better, more consistent separation between the Ring of Honor championships and the Ring of Honor product. I just, my vote would be to never put the Ring of Honor titles on AEW television. I mean, I'm always going to advocate for that strongly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that sort of as a qualifier, I thought this was fine. And I thought the story that they're telling with Christian and the patriarchy has been solid enough. It does feel like maybe they're stretching this out to reintroduce Luchasaurus or Killswitch, and it maybe, it's, I don't know what his status is, but if he's nursing an injury, maybe it's taken longer than they expected. I'm not sure.
Yeah. All right. JB says, I think that Jamie Hayter's doing a good job of winning crowd enthusiasm back after her very long injury layoff. Her promo was fiery and on point tonight, and the crowd was with her as she brawled with Mercedes. I wouldn't mind Athena somehow getting involved in the final of the women's Owen at Double or Nothing, allowing Jamie to win in some capacity. Then we get Tony Jamie and a Mercedes Athena rematch at All In, and we can save Tony versus Mercedes for a big event down the line. However, that does ruin the face-heel dynamic in the women's world title scene. I think it's preferable to build Jamie as another female face star. I thought Jamie was good tonight, Brandon. What do you think?
Yeah, she was good. She is someone who I think there was obviously very, very high hopes for, and someone who was really working herself into a good position in the women's division. Unfortunately, the extended time off that she had due to injury led to a whole host of women who managed to organically get over and become, stars in the division. And that division has turned around significantly since Hayter was gone and then eventually returned. So It's taken a while for her to find her footing, but I think that they've been doing a good enough job getting her there. And I think that having a big money match on pay-per-view with Mercedes Moné, who has been lights out on pay-per-view and in big matches, I think will be very, very good for her. I'm curious to see what direction they go. It does feel like maybe they would want to save Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné for later down the road, but they also could want that as a co-headliner for All In. I mean, I could certainly see that being a marquee matchup for a big stadium show. So I'm not sure. I could see it going either way. I think that if we're looking at one of these two matches being Moné's first major singles loss, it would seem more likely to me that would come at the hands of Toni Storm than it would Jamie Hayter. But maybe they just want to, strap the rocket to Hayter, and I don't necessarily think that is the worst idea.
Yeah. No, I don't either. I mean, I think part of establishing somebody new is treating them as equal and occasionally better than the people who have the star power and have gotten a bigger push. And I thought she was good tonight. I think JB's right. She's doing a good job winning crowd enthusiasm back. I wasn't even some people are down on her for coming back with a different look and Becky Lynch this, and I don't know, but it feels like she's comfortable in this look, in this persona. Yeah. Okay. JB says Okada needs to have at least a few high-profile singles matches before the presumed match with Omega at All In, if Tony Khan wants us to think that this match really means something outside of their New Japan past. And Kevin Knight isn't really what I'm referring to. Has Okada done that? Scattered in history enough? Does it matter if it's going to be presented as a match of legends, each a little past their prime, but still can go, and it's going to be, a great match. Is that fine given everything else we talked about that they got going?
I would prefer to see more, but given the way that Tony has booked Okada, I don't think we're going to get anything more than what we have. I think it's going to be Kenny Omega is Kenny Omega, and Kazuchika Okada is the guy you really liked in New Japan, and now he says bitch. I just don't think that there's going to be. I haven't seen anything on AEW television that makes me think that we're going to see a signature Okada match at any point, with the exception of probably the match with Omega. So I think that they are going to assume that People know that Kenny Omega is a big star. He's largely been treated as a big star in AEW. They talk like Okada is a big star. His appearances on television do not sync with that designation whatsoever. But they're going to go with it because Tony books pro wrestling as though every single person watching his show watches as much pro wrestling as he does. So
yeah, and likes the same things, and yes. I mean, it's a limiting characteristic when it comes to AEW growth.
I would just say that if you are strictly an AEW fan and you have not seen any Kazuchika Okada outside of AEW, I would have a very hard time feeling like Omega versus Okada is a big deal.
Yeah.
Other than them telling me it's a big deal.
Yep. That's fair. Ramen Noodle says, Tony doesn't even need the rub at this point. Tony Storm, Monet can survive a clean loss to Hayter. Zach Barber said, Jamie leaned in all the way to the Daphne look tonight, and I love it. Derek Mitchell says, Jamie Hayter needs a makeover. She looks like Daphne from Scooby-Doo. First of all, Daphne from Scooby-Doo, I know there's a movie, and it's sort of, timeless and iconic, and it's like, I talked to Todd years and years ago about Popeye being sort of a timeless, iconic, character that, everybody knows or should have some knowledge of. He disagreed and didn't think it reached that level. I don't know if Daphne from Scooby-Doo, kind of culturally is what the majority of people watching are thinking when they see Jamie Hayter. I don't think they're thinking, oh, there's Daphne from Scooby-Doo. So therefore, I think it's okay to lean into it because people can kind of Google it and go, oh, yeah. But there's nothing inherently wrong with that either. Like, why are people dogging on Daphne so much? Like, if you look like Daphne, so what? You don't look like Tony Storm. You don't look like Mercedes Moné. You look like Daphne. Why? What's wrong? Poor Daphne. It's like, this is like a death knell to a career to be compared to her. She was just she was who she was. I don't know. Yeah.
And it's not like it's not like it's someone who's in the cultural zeitgeist right now in a way that you can like point at her and say, oh, she's clearly like copying this or ripping this off. Like I'm trying to think of a good comparison, but it's not like if this were the year 2000 and we had a women's wrestler who was like exclusively wearing skin tight red jumpsuits to look like Britney Spears, like, and it was during a time that was culturally relevant, then I think that there would be a certain degrading tone when you were making that comparison. But with something that's not like currently out there, currently super popular, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. All right. Finally, from JB, I think tonight we saw the cracks in the foundation of the Death Riders that will ultimately lead to Mox losing the title to either Ospreay or Hangman. Excalibur did a good job of explaining that Moxley has continually been willing to sacrifice Wheeler Yuta, but tonight was the first time that he seemed willing to sacrifice his General Claudio. I think that part of the story leading it all in will be a slow downfall of the Death Riders. As always, love the show, and everyone go VIP. Thank you, JB, as always. He always delivers good topics. I always like to get to his email in these shows. Yeah, and I think they're planting the seeds for that in a way that doesn't feel like they're hitting you over the head with it. But Moxley standing there and not coming to Claudio's aid, and I mean, Moxley and Wheeler can't muster up with a distraction from. It feels like they should be able to. That they would be willing to go into battle against Will Hobbs despite Powerhouse having wielding a chair, especially after. Joe's been through a grilling match. I don't know. I mean, it did seem like they weren't great friends and they weren't very brave, which is a heelish thing to do. But it also seems like something, and it certainly crossed my mind, and Excalibur underlined it, is Claudio okay with this?
Yeah. And we wouldn't think twice of it if it was Wheeler Yuta, because everyone in the Death Riders has shown that he is to be sacrificed. If somebody's going to take the fall, it's going to be Wheeler. But now that Moxley has exposed himself in the sense that he's revealed that he's fine with it being Claudio, if that just happens to be the way the cookie crumbles, it sets things up.
Yep. Derek Hubbard says, great showing by Claudio. Agree with Brandon. The Death Riders are the unfortunate example of a team where the whole is less than the sum of the parts. Claudio and Pac are more interesting alone. I don't know about Claudio and Pac being more interesting alone, Brandon. What do you think? Claudio and Pac better individual, or to me they seem like faction wrestlers in a faction who are backing up an alpha.
I would take Pac by himself before I took Claudio by himself, I think. But
even so,
I think both I think that both of them work better at this stage. I was a big fan of, like, I really like Death Triangle. I thought that was a cool faction that worked well when it was on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. That is to say that I like Pac in that role, and I think Claudio works well in a group too.
Yeah. Just grabbing some chat comments here that I think are noteworthy. Still waiting. Larry from David. I still don't know what that is. Still waiting for Okada.
He said it's shorthand for the province that he's from in Canada.
Oh, okay. I'm a dumb American who doesn't know. What is it? Vancouver, Detroit, British
he might have
Columbia?
Said it and I missed it, but
okay.
I did catch the comment in the chat.
Yes, VDB Canada. Let's give him credit here. Nope, even Google doesn't know. It's not even a top search return on Google. That's funny, or I don't know. I mean, all right. Anyway, he says still waiting for Okada to disprove he's not the most overrated wrestler in AEW. It's like he's stolen Orange Cassidy's lazy gimmick, but without ever kicking into high gear. I don't know if never, but I don't know. I mean, it's not an entirely unfair comment. Andy, the Mario and Sonic fan 2000 says, I saw Sinners yesterday. Definitely worth seeing on the big screen. So there's your movie recommendation, Brandon, earlier. Someone endorsing it. Okay, we hear this a lot. Hasn't been necessarily the case all the time, but Derek Mitchell says, I don't buy AEW pay-per-views. They're too long and cost too much. But so far, the build to Double or Nothing is underwhelming and lackluster with only 2 matches penciled in. Monet against Hayter and Page against Ospreay. Are they waiting too long? I think they're trying to obviously peak viewership next Wednesday for the Beach Break event, and I think we'll see a lot get announced then. I don't think Tony believes it's important to announce all the matches ahead of time, because then the TVs can get kind of repetitive promoting something that is already established. He likes to have the stories kind of peak, and then it becomes a pay-per-view match. But I know what Derek's saying. You want to have a couple weeks to have 4 or 5 matches that you're able to talk about and imagine what's going to happen, talk to your friends about it.
Especially with what is usually a 9 to 10 match card.
Right.
You're talking about barely 20% or not even 20% of the show being announced with 18 days to go or whatever it is. Yeah, that's not good. And it's been a problem with these shows for quite a while now. It's something that we saw WWE do a lot, especially when they got to the network era, where they didn't feel like there was a need to go heavy on build because people were no longer paying $50 for the pay-per-views, and so they thought they could get away with it. And eventually, I think they realized that was not a good strategy, and they moved away. They moved further in the other direction. And AEW is still 10 years after the creation of or 11 years after WWE Network launched and redefined what a wrestling pay-per-view is in terms of what they ask of you monetarily. Here they are in 2025, still asking for $50 and not announcing more than 2 matches 18 days out. I mean, to me, that, it's not good. You're muted.
Had to do that. It's late in the show. FTR and Stokely Hathaway confronted Tony Schiavone. Schiavone showed some spine, stood up, towered over Stokely. And Tony's not a tall guy. But then FTR kind of put him in his place. What you think about that? Just, it was a conduit to continue the storyline, which, they probably think that McAfee's copying them with this whole Gunther thing. And it's to set up the either Cash or Dax against Danny Garcia match tomorrow night.
Thought it was good. I think FTR have been good in this role so far. I assume that obviously this is building toward a return for Adam Copeland. And we get, whatever he's going to do against FTR, whether that is some sort of reunion with Christian Cage or we've misread that and it's instead just going to be something else. I'm not sure, but I've enjoyed this heel run for FTR so far. I've been really glad that they did not split them up and that it was instead just a heel turn. I did like, I don't know if it was Dax or Cash that made the comment, but it was off mic, and the fans were jarring or jeering him pretty heavily, and he just said, "We're the good guys."
Yes, that's kind of Kevin Owens-esque.
Yeah.
Cash has been good on the mic as a heel. He's been more interesting and has a little more going for him. Zach Barber in the chat said Nigel McGuinness is 100% teaming with Garcia. So, yeah. All right. Oh, by the way, there's a good chance Brian Zillum will be hosting the post AEW Collision Thursday night special live post show here on our PWTorch YouTube channel. So join him and a co-host to be confirmed later if that goes through. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. You can find it on the YouTube page. We'll have a link to the show in our Collision TV report on Thursday night also. So you can join him, get a different perspective on things, and they'll be talking about that. FTR, one of Cash or Dax against Garcia. I thought they did a nice job promoting tomorrow night's Collision, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, nothing on the card is like, oh, I've got to see that. But for what Collision is, what it's become, they're doing a good job at least folding it into Dynamite. It doesn't feel like it exists on this island anymore, where wrestlers can only appear on Collision.
Well, sometimes it's only if it's back-to-back nights. Then does a Collision wrestler show up on Dynamite, which we got a bit of tonight.
Yep.
So, what do you think of the Chris Statlander Willow Nightingale thing? I think both of their characters are a little bit awkward. There are people who are fans of both Statlander and Willow. But yeah, what did you make of that setting up their match tomorrow night?
It's a little strange. I mean, there's always sort of that, like, will they or won't they tension with them, whether they're going to be opponents, friends. It seems to fluctuate a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're two wrestlers who I think are both really, really talented, but they've both been harmed by some of the booking. Statlander especially has really been negatively impacted by the turns or lack thereof, and sort of lack of definement in either of those roles. I continue to be really impressed with Willow overall, and I think I see a higher ceiling for her than I do Statlander at this point. I liked Willow's involvement with the Death Rider stuff. I thought that she was a good counter to Marina Shafir. And it made sense, of course, to pivot her out of that a little bit once you pivoted Swerve out, because she was brought in sort of as a connection to Swerve Strickland. But I wouldn't mind that being something that they revisit if she is to, strike up a friendship with Will Ospreay, or already has one, because that would make sense given his relationship with Swerve. I think that's a good fit for her.
We also have Speedball and Realistico. They set that up with the run-in to save Kevin Knight. Your quick thoughts on Speedball and what they've been doing with him, and kind of how he's fit into the mix.
Interesting character. I think that the wrestling has been really good. The character is, I could take it or leave it for the most part. It feels like his offense stands out, which is hard to do in AEW because everybody's so good and quick and fast, and it's hard. But he somehow manages to do it. I think that the character work, the look, it will establish a ceiling for him. He does not feel like a guy who could get much higher than he currently is. I
think he's in a good spot. Yeah, they got plenty of top people, but having a quirky cult figure, cult popular guy who people just sort of have, find sort of charming or quirky or adorable or something, who does all these karate moves.
Kind of in that. Yeah, he's kind of in like the Orange Cassidy spot right now with Orange on the TV.
Yep. And I don't think he'll go as high as Orange Cassidy, but
no.
But yeah, he's good. I mean, putting him, Tony Khan trusts him. He likes that he shakes things up style wise, and And then they also announced Anthony Bones against Lee Johnson. I mean, that's fine. They didn't do any context for that. Brandon, anything else you want to bring up about Dynamite before we sign off?
No, don't think so.
All right, so I'll just again note that we have VIP membership, and you're missing out on a lot of what we do. If you're a big pro wrestling fan and like our approach to covering wrestling, then we invite you to become VIP. You can unlock all our VIP shows with a 7-day free trial. Search PWTorch VIP in Spotify or Patreon. You can also get full information, or you get information on full VIP membership at pwtorch.com/govip. Whatever option you choose, that will include our post WWE Backlash VIP exclusive roundtable that I'll be hosting Saturday night. Usually that is with both Todd Martin and Rich Fan. And that also includes access to over 20 years of post pay-per-view roundtables that I've hosted with an array of Torch contributors over the years. And so, yeah, it's kind of fun to have access to go back and see what we said about events you might be have watched or never watched or reading about or watching in a library somewhere. So check it out, pwtorch.com/govip. Thanks to Brandon LeClair, my co-host. We'll talk to him again soon. And thanks to all of you for listening tonight and watching us on YouTube. We'll talk to you, Brian, probably tomorrow night after Collision. And then I'll be by Friday night after SmackDown. And then we'll be covering Backlash for you on Saturday. Thanks, everybody.